Hello ladies and gentlemen, this is Blue Maxima. Let me talk to you for a little bit about Compound, which is one of my favorite, well, I wouldn't even call it a hidden gem because it has over 900 reviews on Steam and they all add up to overwhelmingly positive, which is genuinely kind of ridiculous. There are very few games that actually manage that. But to be fair, it deserves all of those reviews because the game itself is incredibly good, and it's actually been really good for something like 4 years because this game's genuinely 4 years old. I'm not even kidding. It's been out since like 2018, and I think I've owned it since then too, because he put out a demo with it, and the demo was so impressive that I just ended up buying it right there on the spot with how it communicates its gameplay and its atmosphere, and it does just such a good job at creating what's almost an old school experience. Because if I were to compare this to any other shooter, like one of the things that people do when they talk about VR shooters is they compare them to other shooters from flat screens. So, for example, with Pavlov, the most notable one, you've got Counter-Strike. With Onward, you've got Arma. With Zero Caliber, you've got Call of Duty, etc., etc. Compound is like Wolfenstein 3D. It's a roguelike shooter. What you do in it is you go through all these floors, you kill every enemy on these floors, and when they're all dead, you get to move on to the next floor. You pick up weapons along the way, and you use these weapons in order to defeat enemies just that little bit more effectively, and if you die on the way down, you go straight back up the top and you try again. It really is that simple, but the gameplay itself, which all takes place on one plane, and you have a very simple set of weapons along a very simple set of lines, it really just reminds me of that whole Wolfenstein 3D feel. All of the levels more or less have the same sort of relatively flat layout, but frankly it doesn't really matter because the gameplay is, I don't want to say unnaturally smooth, because it isn't. It's about as smooth as you would hope something would be in VR, but even if you go and play something like Pavlov VR on the best VR rig you can imagine, it's 120 FPS and a Valve Index is the best sort of experience you can possibly get. It's always gonna lack that feeling of smoothness that Compound has. Everything in Compound flows so well, whether it be the animations of your gun firing, your hands moving, the way enemies move around, the way their animations work, hell, even the way the environment moves. It just has this weird smoothness about it that I've never seen any other VR game match, and I find it incredibly strange. But at least it works in the game's favor because it makes the game incredibly satisfying to play, just because of how smoothly everything flows together, and it really helps you get into the zone, where you're just thinking about all of the strategies you need to do, the weapons you need to pick up, the ammo that you need to go and get. The smoothness just adds to the immersion tenfold. And it does such a good job, and I don't know what techniques they've been using to pull it off, but they need to start talking to pretty much every other VR game developer to pass along these things, because I've never had a VR game play as smoothly as this one. I can safely say that I've played Pavlov at something like 110 FPS, and this game was smoother at 72 on my Quest 1, back when that thing still worked. It's genuinely unbelievable when you get into the headset and you're like, why is this so smooth? But it also, of course, really helps because there's a lot of enemies, there's a lot of bullets going out, you have the ability to physically dodge them. Good luck. Also, a reason why playing this game on a Quest is actually really good because it just gives you the freedom to duck and dodge out of the way of bullets as you like. But yes, the way the enemies approach you and attack you is all perfectly readable, and you can just go and just wipe the floor with them. And it's great. It moves so smoothly, but of course that's not the only positive. The next positive is the weaponry, because there are a fair few different weapons. There's a bunch of different kinds of pistols that you can pick up off the wall, and they all do different things, and therefore you can find your favorite pistol and stick with it. But of course you got a bunch of different weapons as well that all have their own unique reloads, whether it be SMGs, whether it be rocket launchers, shotguns, sniper rifles, just a little bit of every sort of regular old trope you can imagine, right, is in this game's weapon set. But that smoothness and that feeling of handling passes along to the weapons as well, whether it be just picking up and shooting them, because they are all, as I said, really smooth and therefore really easy to handle, but they've all also got their own really easy reloads, which remain really simple. Although, if you're used to playing games like Pavlov, Onward, Hot Dogs, Horseshoes, and Hand Grenades, where you're doing the reloads where it's like, drop the mag out, stick a new mag in physically, cock the slide physically, turn the safety off and go. This game is so simple that it might trip you up. Press a button, do something, press the button again, you're done. It's so much simpler, but thanks to the way the animations work, and again, just combined with that fantastic smoothness the game's got going on, all of the reloads, all of the animations for reloading all work so well, and they've all got their own neat little polishes and things to them that make them satisfying to do every time, whether it be sticking the rocket in the back of the rocket launcher, popping off the top of the railgun weapon and slapping a new battery in. The way that the breech closes, I don't know what the exact terms are, for the double-barreled shotgun, the way that you slide the ammo in on the top of the sniper rifle. All of these different reloads are just immensely satisfying, and as a result, it makes the gunplay really enjoyable as well, because you'll go in, you'll take shots at all the enemies, and you'll be perfectly in control of everything you're doing. Every shot, every reload, every little bit of movement, and this smoothness just adds onto it. And when you get going, when you get into the zone, it is one of the most satisfying things I've played in VR so far. It genuinely is just like a snap of the fingers, and you're just in, and it works amazingly. And for something this simple, it's genuinely a surprise, but this guy has been working on this for so long, and he knows so well how to make this all work, and it's just a work of art. It's genuinely just a work of art. It goes so well. And just on its own, that would be enough to recommend it, just because of how well it plays, how well it flows, how well it just does everything. And it's genuinely just a pleasure to turn the game on and just go shoot stuff for a while. Which is good, you need that for a roguelike shooter, which relies on its replayability, but even then, on top of all that, it has some really clever design decisions. Like, I love the way how the levels are paced out. So the way it works is, you start out in a smaller version of a level. You can go around, see the enemies that you're going to have to deal with, but you usually won't have to deal with more than one or two at a time. And that's when they'll start introducing the new enemies to you in relatively safe situations. Not situations where you can't die, but situations that you'll be able to get out of with relative ease. And then once you're done with that floor, you'll go on to the second floor of that phase. It'll be bigger, it'll have more obstacles, it'll have more varied combinations of enemies, and the enemies that's introduced in the first floor of this theme will come back to haunt you with a vengeance, and suddenly everything will be a bit harder, there'll be a big boss man or a new weapon to go pick up, and then it repeats the cycle. So you're not staying in the same theme for too long, you're always getting new enemies coming along, adding to the progression of the game itself. And it's never getting visually boring or frustrating, which for a game as flat as this, where you never jump, you never go up or down, is something that's absolutely critical. And I've panned a lot of other games for doing the same sort of flat thing, but not being able to keep the variety up. This does a really good job at it, especially when older and newer enemies start entering the mix, and you have to deal with them in newer and different ways. Speaking of which, let's talk about the enemies, because there's a lot of them. They introduce new types every 2 levels, along with the theme changes. They introduce new environmental hazards every time. And sometimes they'll even introduce bosses. And the nice thing about these enemies is, while they aren't the smartest enemies in the world, they also aren't brain dead stupid. They'll know to take like a circular path around you. They'll know to float up and down a bit if they're in like a shotgun or what, not a shotgun, like a jetpack or a drone or what have you. They know to stick to walls and stay out of your line of sight. which does make it a little bit too easy to hop around a corner and just fire blindly around. But even then, there are enemies that are way better at predicting that. Like the robots that go across the floor that need like 10 shots from your pistol. So you can't just hide and go bang, bang, bang around the corner. The only ones who are really weak to that are the regular dudes. Then you've got the drones, some of which will attack you directly, some of which will suicide bomb you, some of which will keep away from you and fire away at you and make themselves really hard to hit, and those are the worst ones. And it's not like you can't use them against themselves. They don't infight, but their bullets can hurt each other and set off explosive traps in the world. So take advantage of that, because it's incredibly useful and it will keep you alive for just a little bit longer. And it's just a great set of enemies too, again, thanks to this AI, thanks to the way everything works. It all flows. It all works so well together. And they all drop energy, not energy, they all drop ammo, they all drop health, they all drop everything you need in order to survive. But of course, that stuff will expire. So there's always that little bit going on about, I need to kill these guys as close to me as possible so that I don't lose the pickups they might potentially drop. And as a result, as I said, when you just get into it, when you're just in the game and you're going at it, it flows. It flows so well. The smoothness of the game, the way the enemy works, the way the weapons and the reloading works. And it's all just really smooth and incredibly satisfying to play. Despite its simplicity, despite how it's a roguelike, so having to repeat earlier floors might eventually get boring, but even then they get around that by giving you an instant teleporter. And the nice thing about that teleporter is that if you use that teleporter when all the enemies on the floor are dead, it'll just warp you straight there, facing the elevator, so you can just go. And even then, it'll show you, like, what direction the nearest enemy is in, and what parts of the level you haven't cleared out yet. It's all just so well polished. And again, just incredibly satisfying to play. And thankfully that's not where it ends either. It's got an absolute ton of levels, and it's got mutators, which are absolutely great. Because you actually have to buy them out of a vending machine and inject them into yourself. It's kind of weird, but okay, I don't mind it. Although if you're one of the people out there who's afraid of needles, you have the option to turn that off in the options menu. Fine, nothing wrong with that, as long as it's an option. And the mutators actually make things interesting as well. You want to die in one hit, but all the enemies die in one hit as well? Grab 2 pistols and just go John Wick on them? You can do that. You want to make it so that it's a bit more like Wolfenstein, where there's tons more enemies in the level and tons more drops as a result, but the game's a fair bit harder. You can do that. You want to take out the reloads and have them happen automatically at the expense of having them happen just that little bit slower? You can do that. There's a couple of others that are interesting as well, like randomizing not only the order of the levels that you get, but when enemies and weapons get introduced in the cycles. So you might end up getting introduced to the really heavy mechs in like the second set of levels, and that's going to be a problem. Just little things like that give you a bit more longevity. There's 3 difficulty modes as well. You're watching medium. Although, admittedly, I'm not the biggest fan of hard mode, because what they do on hard mode is, on the second floor, they introduce this unkillable beast that's constantly following you around and will attack you if it gets too close. That's not particularly fun. I'd like that more as a mutator than as something relying on the hard difficulty, but there you go. And I'm not even playing the final version yet. Apparently there's still a final set of levels with a final boss to go into the full version. This is the HQ revamp, which I believe is 0.529? Yep, 0.5.29. I was 1 dot point off there. And it also helps that the game looks gorgeous. This retro-inspired theme with massive worlds on the outside of the windows and the enemies and everything is just a really nice looking game. I don't even know how to describe this theme, but it's clear that someone's got a bit of artistic talent in them, and it genuinely just looks great. All the models are really cool. It makes great use of low-res textures and low amounts of polygons to make things look how they should, while at the same time maintaining this whole retro feel to it. And I'd be lying if I said I could tell you about the music, but the sounds are really good as well, including the fact that you can actually hear bullets whizzing by your head, to the point where you can tell where the bullets are coming from and you know what direction you need to run in. And it's so good. And that's my opinion on Compound. It's so good. It's genuinely one of the best VR shooters that you can get. It's also really lightweight, so it runs on anything, and it runs really damn well. It's so... that might be one of the reasons why it's so smooth, but since it's so lightweight, you can run it on pretty much any VR-capable rig, and I'm willing to bet a couple of rigs that wouldn't be able to run Pavlov or something like that might actually be able to run Compound, because it's just so light on resources. So, yeah. If you have a VR headset and a PC that's capable of playing Compound, you should get Compound, because it's really good, and I enjoy it to no end. There's no, like, ifs, ands, or buts. Maybe an if you're worried that the final version will never come out, but there's no reason to believe that it won't. It's not like the developers died yet or anything. Yeah. It's genuinely fantastic. And I look forward to seeing what's in the final update. With that said, I'm going to shut up and let you watch the rest of this gameplay with the sound on. This has been Blue Maxima. I'll see you all next time.